leaders set the tone. They are examples of an organization, how they act, how they behave, how they are able to prioritize their own mental health and wellness becomes an example for folks to do the same. If people are just constantly in these positions of power and they're creating toxic environments or they're moving towards a burnout environment, then folks will naturally think that this is just the culture of the organization.
Welcome to Leadership Rewired. Allison Allen and Dean Martin invite you to join them for an honest conversation that brings a personal perspective to the issues of leadership.
Did you know that 3 out of 4 employees feel excluded from traditional workplace wellness programs? It's actually staggering when you think about that, because it's like wellness programs should be for everyone. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about how diversity, equity, inclusion, and wellness should function and work together. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Dean Martin. I'm Allison Allen, and we have our special guest, Bhavik Shah.
Yeah.
First, before we dive in, this is the 5th of our 5-part series. We are excited and love this series so much. But I do want to just check in with my friends on the, on this podcast and just, how are you guys doing? How are you feeling? There's a lot going on in the world today. I don't even want to mention the things that we were talking about before this call, because I think that would just bring people down. But just how are people feeling?
You go, Bhavik.
No pressure. I'm feeling all the feelings, but I'm looking forward to just resting in about a week and a half. I'm shutting down all emails, all social media, and just taking some time for about 2 weeks as we approach 2025, because I need that restoration time. Yeah.
I actually love that. What does that even look like? How would you coach
now that I will not be available after the 16th, and making sure the out of offices are on, and I have a few dinners with some friends I'm looking forward to. Need to decorate for Christmas, just small little things, nothing too hectic, but I'm looking forward to just kind of going into a little bit of a hole for 2 weeks.
Nice.
I might actually reach out to you and say, coach me for a half an hour. How do I do that? Maybe it's 2 hours, because I don't even know now how do I not look at emails? How do I know what's going on? But I would love to do that.
There are apps now that lock different apps for you. So I installed them, and when you naturally just go to your phone without thinking and you just click buttons. Now there are apps that lock it, and then you're like, oh, you have to enter a password, and then it prevents you from actually looking at it.
I saw a guy, I'm just going to say, I saw something on Instagram the other day about a guy who was trying to quit smoking and was doing it very unsuccessfully. It was a bit of a joke, but in order to stop this, he had a whole elaborate cage created over his head, like a big grid around his head. And I think he put both of his hands in plaster or something so that he wouldn't smoke.
Wow.
So I wonder if there's an equivalent there for you, Allison, around not accessing your email.
Okay, first of all, something about a cage and being an African-American, no. That's something I want to do. And more than that, I think I'll just go with the apps.
Yeah.
Let's stick with technology.
It feels like the right thing to do. How are you doing, Dean?
Yeah, thanks, Allison, and thanks for your answer, Bhavik. I think I'm doing okay. I think part of the joy and the pain of being a human is to be able to hold many different things at the same time. And not to veer too strongly towards anything and just saying, oh, well, now I'm super hopeful and that's the only way I'm approaching life, or things are hopeless and it's never going to change, but to be able to observe. So I think that's how I'm doing, is sort of noticing as thoughts and feelings come in and out, for myself to be able to just pause in the moment and go, okay, here's a feeling of sadness.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that saying to me? oh, here's a feeling of optimism. Oh, there's an action I can take. What does that mean for me? Okay.
Yeah.
So just to be incredibly mindful and conscious of my own experience, almost observing my own experience rather than just being in it. And you don't even realize there are other people who are experiencing things, and maybe, my own subjective experience is just that. It's subjective. Yep. So there are other people to connect with who can give me another point of view, or my wiser, better self can give me some advice when in the moment I'm feeling exhausted or not very hopeful about the future, or whatever the case may be, just to kind of, hold all of those things together and to let it move through. And secondly, just to stick with my focus of this important work and working with clients and finding the joy in that. Yeah. And you,
I personally am, having some ups and downs. And the downs are usually ones when I'm sort of just like all the things and worried about all the things and mostly about my kids. And so but then I, have been figuring out ways to just like climb out of it. And I'm actually looking forward to, I can't believe I'm saying this, but just a new year. And, I know January 20th, we'll sign in a new president, but I'm just looking forward to starting fresh in 2025 and whatever the new context is, figuring out what my place is in it and figuring how I can continue to progress myself, my business, my family, and meet my goals, which is, absolutely around, building generational wealth for my kids. And so that's what I'm mostly looking forward to. I'm trying to connect mostly with my friends and with my loved ones on a regular basis. That's just where I'm just trying to keep my intention. And so, ups and downs, but you got to climb out of them and figure out whatever route that is for you to do that and just keep it moving, because we can't change a lot of the things that are happening. All right. So Dean, let's dive into this.
Yeah. Well, Allison, I like what you said there. You often talk to us on these podcasts about staying within your circle of influence. So doing the things you can where you can affect change rather than spending a lot of time and unnecessary energy being concerned about things we can't do. Right. So even in the fifth of our 5 podcast series talking about wellness, this is also one where we're wanting to make sure that everybody listening walks away with some practical things that they can do that are tightly within their area of influence, rather than, I wish I could do this, but I don't have the budget, or my organization or my CEO, blah, blah, blah. Let's not worry about that bigger stuff right now. Or what change can you effect? And, when we talk about wellness and DE&I, maybe some may have the notion that these are separate, but we actually do see them as being deeply connected. And such a lovely and important topic for us to be talking about today. So, Bhavik, again, so lovely to have you here as our expert. Just share with us, why do you think this conversation, why is it still, I think it's always been important, but why do you think this conversation is critical now?
So happy to be here with both of you, first of all. And yes, I agree. There is more importance and more focus and concentration on the intersection of mental health and DEI, because the way the world is going, whether we look at it from a workforce perspective or whether we look at it from a political standpoint, everyone is impacted by the events in the world, and that takes a different toll on people. And when we think about how lives are shifted, workplaces are shifted, regulations and policies and civil liberties are being shifted, or in some cases taken away, that all has a direct impact on mental health. And as a result, how we show up at work, how we are able to do our jobs, our performance abilities are all affected in a different way. And just look at us. We are 3 different individuals, high-performing individuals, But our backgrounds and our identities are very different. So how we just cope and how we're looking forward to 2025, even that introduction, our ability is different. So when we think about leaders taking that into account, it's more important to understand that first, you can't ignore it. And then two, we have to be adaptable for folks so that they understand that they can be human at the workplace.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but let's sort of go to a big picture, right? And I on this podcast, we talk all the time about the leader's role, the leader's role, the leader's role. We talk also about the leader taking care of himself. So let's just be clear about that. But why do you believe that leaders are actually the driving force behind inclusive wellness? Like, why is that a thing?
We all have seen, and when we say we, us three have seen, and a lot of people have seen, leaders set the tone. They are examples of an organization, how they act, how they behave, how they are able to prioritize their own mental health and wellness becomes an example for folks to do the same. If people are just constantly in these positions of power and they're creating toxic environments or they're moving towards a burnout environment, then folks will naturally think that this is just the culture of the organization. And they will feel neglected and they will not prioritize their own mental health, which then, of course, affects everything else in the performance of the organization. Also, leaders are sometimes just overwhelmed. Like you said, they also need to understand that they need to take a step back and understand that things need to shift and they can't do it all either. They need to bring in other folks and other support, whether that's their peers, whether that's HR, whether that's their direct reports. It all stems from understanding that you have power to shift the organization. You don't have to do it all, but it does start with you.
Yeah. I mean, that totally makes sense. And I think the sorts of leaders who are listening to this podcast are those who are committed to wellness and having that positive impact in in their respective organizations. And yet also we've also experienced firsthand how sometimes a leader may unintentionally leave certain groups out. They're like well-meaning and they're like, yeah, let's create this initiative or let's do this thing. I don't know, like assuming that wellness looks the same for everybody. Giving a gym membership discount to employees and saying, okay, that's great. We care about physical health and physical wellness. And yet what message is that sending to some people who have disabilities or who want a different kind of care rather than, I don't want to go work in the gym, yet the organization is like, yeah, we're so proud of ourselves. This is what we've done for our wellness. And yet it can backfire for some for some employees as well.
Right.
100%. I think that's it's hard for me when I think about the people who establish these programs and organizations, and they're usually sitting in, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're usually sitting in like benefits teams or wellness teams. And in the spirit of just being Allison, it just doesn't make sense to me that no one's asking the question, who might we be leaving out? Yeah. Like it feels like we have to provide benefits. So who might we be leaving out? We need to make sure there's wellness programs. Who might we be leaving out? Versus, to your point, Dean, let's do a gym membership, and it's like with no thought about the impact of who's feeling left out. So like, Bhavik, can you give an example of like, successfully driving inclusivity and wellness? Like, and before you do that, can you answer my question? Like, how does this even happen?
How do people get left out?
Yeah, like, I mean, why? I mean, I know this. I know that's, I don't even know why I'm asking that question. Because
it's a good question.
We're all left out.
Yeah. We all get to have a rant now about how
leadership, promotion, everything.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know. It just seems like with wellness, it's just like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I because I've been working in this field for a while, the issue that I see, or one of the issues that I see often, is that people like to just put a Band-Aid over the issue, right? So like, for example, going back to the gym membership, they're like, yeah, we have this great gym membership, like, in metropolitan areas like New York. oh, we have Equinox membership. We're giving you like 50% off, and everyone gets really excited about this. But that doesn't actually cure a toxic leadership style or a toxic environment as a whole. Or it doesn't actually help people to take advantage of those benefits if you're working till 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 12 a.m. at night. It all goes back to what culture are you actually leaving for your company? And we actually talked about this in the first podcast series. I think what is your legacy as a leader? And a lot of folks don't think about that. So they give the green light to these initiatives. They're in town halls or they're in, team meetings, and they say, yeah, use our benefits. It's really important. However, they're not actually doing the same with their actions. When you're scoping out projects, what does that look like? Are you actually thinking about capacity and competency? When you take on new clients and you finalize those sales, do you ask those questions? Do you ask the question that, are these clients with the same values that we have? Do they align with our values as a whole? Or are they toxic? Yeah. Right? Clients sometimes are very demanding, and working in very high-paced environments, they'll ask for the world and they expect the world, and often leaders and teams just give it to them. So while leaders may say, do take advantage of all these benefits, their actions speak otherwise a lot of times. And that's the problem. And that's why people feel left out. Because one, you're losing credibility, you're losing trust of your people. And these are not culture benefits. These are just perks. You're offering perks to people. Yeah. Which is the problem.
Yeah. Which is fine. Call it a perk then, but don't fool yourselves into thinking, oh, this is addressing, these are our top 3 initiatives for wellness. We've got that covered. Check. We're off. Yeah. Right. And again, I'm not saying that in a glib way. I don't want any of our colleagues or peers working in the wellness or benefit space to feel like we're coming at them. We're not. We care very deeply. That's why we've got a 5-part podcast series on this. We really do care about it. But Bhavik, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about how you see the connection between wellness and diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do these areas reinforce one another?
Sure. The example that I'm thinking of right off the bat is that a lot of companies now have employee resource groups, ERGs, or business resource groups, business BRGs, or affinity groups, whatever you want to call it. And I was a business sponsor for the AAPI ERG, so Asian American Pacific Islander ERG in a previous role. And my role was to really figure out the unique challenges that the community is facing, both inside the workplace and outside the workplace, so that I can collaboratively design a equitable solution to make them feel more safe at the workplace. Right. And one of the things that I found, and this is my own cultural identity coming into place too, and that helped navigate the conversation, is that a lot of AAPI members struggle with self-advocacy. We've been brought up from a very young age that our hard work will speak for itself. And leveraging my own lived experience in corporate and in the workforce, I knew the toll that could take on my own mental health, and how DEI and mental health really need to be intersected when we think about supporting different communities. Because to our point earlier, a gym membership or a subscription to a mental health app is great, but it's supplementary. It's not going to actually cure toxic leadership styles or toxic work environments, because we all are ingrained to work differently. Yeah. So with this information and understanding how self-advocacy is very difficult for AAPI community members, I helped build a business case for my peers to think about, how can we keep these employees engaged, and how do we give them the right support and equitable solutions to self-advocate for themselves. We built out a training budget, and we hired an external vendor, and we opened it up to everybody. We didn't just specifically keep it to the AAPI community, but the data that we received through that ERG community was vital. Then we offered it to the entire organization, and a lot of people signed up, because confidence is something that we all need a little bit of practice on. We're not born with it. And self-advocating for what we need at the workplace is a great way to, one, take control of your career, but then also to protect your mental health, because now you are in the driver's seat. You're asking for what you need. You're able to articulate it well with leadership. You have a business plan, an action plan of how you're going to use that confidence and achieve your goals, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's to me the beauty of ERGs. Like, I think, organizations could learn a lot about culture and beliefs and what's it like for this group of people to work in this environment. And I love this notion of self-advocating because, one could argue that most organizations, again, approach benefits and wellness programs like peanut butter, right? But when you say, hey, this isn't actually working for me and this is what I need, you're bringing something to their attention. What else can they do but respond and say, this is something? And that feels like a very connected self-advocation is a solution for sort of highlighting important things that make sense to communities. I love that example. Let's talk a little bit about belonging. Dean, I'll put this question to you. Like, you've been in leadership for a long time. We've talked about on this podcast how we both have been tackling leadership from different perspectives. What do you believe belonging, what role do you think belonging plays in the sort of wellness space?
Well, I always feel emotional when we talk about the word like belonging, because even taking it out of a work environment, we are born into this world needing to be accepted and cared for and loved by other humans. Our survival, our physical survival, it depends upon it. And then very quickly, our emotional flourishing and our growth depends on that. And for us to really be able to grow and to feel seen and loved and to be safe as humans, our wholeness and the intricacies of who we are needs to be acknowledged. And so therefore, when I'm answering the question around what role does belonging play in a work environment, belonging is really about, am I safe? Do I have that psychological safety to contribute, to be who I am, to take risks, to make suggestions without being, suffering negative consequences as a result of that? I would see that having psychological safety allows me to feel like I belong, because not just that I've fitted in or I've assimilated so nicely that nobody is bothered by my difference, but precisely the opposite. Because of my uniqueness, because of my gender expression, or because of where I studied, or because of how I think, that those very elements of me, of my inherent or acquired identity, are celebrated. And because of that, then I still have an important contribution to make it work, and I'm appreciated for that. That's the feeling of belonging. So then we can see if I'm allowed to be me, and I'm not worried too much about what my accent sounds like, or I'm not battling too much against, do I advocate for myself in the right kind of way, or do people have an issue with my sexual orientation, or blah, 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 blah. I don't have to worry about those things. I can spend my time on managing up and supporting my manager and being creative and being resourceful and doing all that beautiful, good stuff, doing the good work stuff and feeling like I'm enjoying my work and what I've studied to do and, use my experiences. People want to do that. So this belonging piece just on its own can feel a little bit, just like a warm hug, which I'm not against, folks. Big fan of a warm hug, but in a work environment, that belonging is you are valued, and that people deeply feel that not necessarily have to bring all of my stuff to work, but I am allowed to be who I am here. And therefore I can really contribute. So we can see that has a positive impact on our mental health and our likelihood of staying longer and wanting to support and grow with others as well.
I think that's so true. Bhavik, what do you think is an overlooked aspect of DEI that leaders should consider when they're designing wellness programs? Like what's missing? What's overlooked often?
Accessibility is probably one of the things that I think a lot of leaders or organizations are missing when it comes to designing workplace mental health programs or wellness programs, because there is this assumption that everyone has the same amount of time, resources, and energy to take advantage of the benefits. Right. Whether that's a gym membership, whether that's a digital app partnership that they've done with, all the wellness apps that are out there right now. A lot of folks have second jobs, they're caregivers, they're parents, they're single parents. They have different responsibilities outside of work, and they may not have the same luxury of taking these yoga classes or meditation classes, or take part of a lot of the corporate challenges of, let's take a walk across the river on a Saturday morning, and you have that connection with your colleagues. That doesn't happen for everybody. And also, a lot of people don't think that's part of their own mental health journey. Yeah. Mental health is very different for different communities. And when we think about marginalized communities, their mental health is very much tied to their values at work, how they're rewarded, their performance, their career succession. All of that is embedded into it. So what I would like to see more of is that rather than piling on benefits or leveraging, the wellness budgets to just do these different types of initiatives, think about what sort of culture you're going to create when it comes to the belonging piece as well. I've seen DEI be kind of evolve. I've been in situations where the D and the B are great. So they're great on diversity, they're great on belonging. Like, you as an individual are welcomed and your identities are welcomed, but the equity is not there. The inclusivity is not there. And people do not break that down. They need to understand, what does equity mean at the workplace? What does inclusion mean at the workplace? Stop thinking that just because you're hiring people of color or people of the LGBTQ plus community or indigenous peoples, that your job is done. Because it's not. Literally the first step of this huge puzzle when we think about DEIB and mental health.
Yeah. And Bhavik, like examples of that, when you're talking about the importance of accessibility, of creating these things with accessibility in mind, that could be, tell me if I'm right here, like maybe rolling out a beautiful mindfulness app or something, and yet being unaware of the fact that, albeit a small percentage of your employees, some don't have a smartphone or don't have access to the Apple Store to download the app or something. Or maybe it's in a language, it's not, English isn't their first language, and they're like, I don't typically have to operate in English, but now I've got this app and it just doesn't feel like something I can have access to and I want to use.
Yeah. It's all of that. And even when we think about having these apps on the corporate side of things, like if you're invested into it, doesn't mean that people actually even know about it. How many times do emails get sent out and communications are sent out and people ignore these messages from folks? And, for example, when you're in consulting or you're in a client-facing role through a company, you're not looking at your corporate emails, you're looking at your client emails.
Yeah.
Right? And so all the messages that come from internally, you're not really getting those updates or communications. Part of what the leaders have to do when they place these consultants in these client-facing roles is that they need to communicate not only that the resource and benefit is now available, but what are the positive impacts that will happen if you start taking advantage of these benefits? And how are they using it? I would love to see more leaders say, I've had a really stressful day. This client is driving me up against the wall. I used this mindfulness app to help you. You're normalizing the conversation. You're being vulnerable, saying that you're human and you obviously need to take a break as well. And lastly, and most importantly, you're providing permission to your team members that they can do exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's make this more actionable, because we always want people to take away some steps and some things that they can do from this podcast. So Bhavik, what would be the first sort of step a leader can take to drive inclusive wellness programs?
I would say ensure everyone's feedback is being collected at the start of any wellness program, whether you're just starting off to create the structure within the organization or you're leveraging HR, or maybe wellness can be embedded into even how people engage with projects. So I can give that specific example. When you're engaging a new client project or new project within your organization, take the feedback of your employees of how you should approach the capacity, how you should approach the resources, which collaborators and stakeholders you need to involve, and then ensure there are further feedback loops to ensure that you're getting all the information throughout the life cycle of the project. Right. Because if you just do it in the beginning, things constantly change, right? We work in a very, very chaotic workforce, and priorities shift constantly. Mergers and acquisitions happen, client demands change, and it's important for you to ensure that the feedback that you're collecting from your team is being integrated within the project throughout the life cycle.
Yeah. I love. Go ahead. Keep going, Bhavik.
Oh no, I was just, and the last tip I was going to give is sometimes a great example for wellness and mental health goes back to my point of earlier about supporting your team members in rooms and conversations that affect their performance and their careers. Advocate for them when you know that they deserve the recognition. For example, performance management frameworks are so rigid sometimes. And if, for example, all three of us were up for a promotion, they're going to take the framework and literally look at the person who followed each and every step and they ticked the box. They're not looking at different approaches to get to the same goal because they're not really creating equity and inclusivity in these performance frameworks. And that's probably another conversation. Yes. But as a leader, you need to understand the strengths of your team members and then advocate that, yes, actually, Allison and Dean did a fantastic job. They actually achieved these goals to the client. Sure, they took a different route, but it was still applaudable and it was still mendable. Yeah. And they deserve this spot, right? You need to make sure that your team trusts you, that when you're in rooms talking about them, that there's full faith in their ability and their competency.
Yeah, that's lovely. No, I'm sorry I interjected. No. Ironically, on the topic about listening. No, fine. Good listening. Here comes Dean Martin barreling in. No, I just wanted to say I love what you said about including those voices throughout the life cycle of a project. I'm sure all of us here have been tapped on the shoulder before for some initiative or whatever. They're like, oh, we'd love your point of view. We're about to, roll out this thing for blah, blah, blah. What do you think? And you're like, oh, great. Thanks so much for including my voice here. Let me tell you all the things I have to say. And they're like, great, beautiful. God bless you. See you later. And then that's the last. And then, a week, a month, a year later, suddenly this thing gets rolled out and you're like, holy crap. They should have come back to me because there's some issues here. But they're like, oh, no, we spoke to our trans audience. Or yes, we definitely, we made sure that, this BRG weighed in. And we're like, when? Oh, just at the beginning. And that was it? Like, no. So staying close to making sure that you hear those voices consistently and you pulling in differences of opinion when creating products, services, etc. I just want to double down on that then, Bhavik. I think some other important behaviors that, again, you've referred to, Bhavik, is around if there is an initiative in your organization and you're a leader, here's a practical thing you can do. Go back, check your internal emails, your emails from corporate communications. It's not too late, even though it's December. This may be the day when you go, oh, yes, when they're talking about this new thing or this app or this program or this whatever, go back and check. Go and connect with your colleagues in HR and wellness and say, if there was one thing I was really modeling for my team, what would it be? What's one thing I can focus on? And somebody in wellness is going to say, thank you, God bless you for coming in and doing that. So really, as a leader, to be modeling those behaviors, that if an organization is rolling something out, are you as the leader even aware of it? Are you
Right.
using it? Do you have a point of view on it? Can you speak to it from a personal point of view rather than here's my long list and saying, hey guys, by the way, don't forget to do this, whatever, 30-step challenge, off you go, but I'm not doing it. So you're really modeling that. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to what you both have said, and it's, again, I'll go back to what I said to earlier in the podcast, is like, it just feels to me that one of the starting principles of any sort of wellness or benefits team is start with inclusion, and making sure that every employee is getting a very inclusive, equitable experience around any wellness program or benefit or perk, however we want to phrase it. So I would say that the thing that I would think would be most important and actionable is really when you're starting to think about future forward planning, or starting to think about strategy, or starting to think about budgeting or planning for next year, that DEI teams and benefits and wellness teams sit down and talk about all the things that ensures that we are supporting caregivers, that we are supporting our employees, we're supporting mental health, physical health, spiritual health, like whatever the case may be, that they sit down and have a very shared conversation around how they want to show up for employees.
Yeah.
That would be the thing that I would add to what you both said.
Yeah. And also because we are a leadership development podcast, Leadership Rewired, I just want to keep on hammering away at this one, that as a leader, the quality of your relationships with your direct reports will directly impact the extent to which you'll be able to hear from them what's working and what's not working. And as a leader, here's a practice, and here's your bonus. Another thing to think about: if your people are not, what I would say, like complaining, they're just like, oh, everybody's happy, and I've got this great team, I've got these 10 directs, and nobody ever has a problem with anything. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you. And also, what might be missing? Can we change and rewire a mindset from, all my people are fine, and there's no complaints, or there's no they aren't coming up with any other things they're unhappy about, but rather to dig into that and say, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Because if somebody's not coming, if I've got a close relationship with my team, then that's the perfect time when, even if it doesn't feel good as a leader to hear it, when they come and say, you know what, Dean, that thing they've just rolled out about the blah, 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 I feel really weird about it. It's talking about parenting, but as a parent, it doesn't meet my needs. That's gold. That is gold. That means because you have got a good relationship with your people, they're bold enough, they have the psychological safety, you've created it for them to say, hey, this isn't working for me. So actually welcome that. Rewire the mindset to, oh, I want everybody to be happy and quiet, to, I want to hear that stuff. If my people are not coming to me, there's actually an issue that I've overlooked, and that might mean that there is some opportunity to be far more equitable that we are missing, and they'd rather be quiet than come to me.
Bhavik, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that silence is not an excuse for proactivity. Just because you're not getting the feedback does not mean that you don't have a duty of care to your people.
Yeah.
And I've seen this before where folks will say, everything seems to be fine. The engagement survey results seem to be proactive.
Yeah.
My challenge to that is that, well, first, are you asking the right questions? If you are, do people still feel safe to provide anonymous feedback? And if they do, then look at your retention rates, your attrition rates. Why are people leaving?
Yeah.
Why are people going on medical leave? Why are people citing burnout as an excuse? Sorry, not excuse, burnout as a reason to take their leaves. There's obviously a disconnect between what you think is happening and the actual employee experience.
Yeah. So an exercise, and just one other practical exercise for leaders to be looking at, and that they can do, is if there are any wellness initiatives, apps, whatever the case may be, project perks coming along, just to look at it again through a fresh lens of, and bring your team along with you on this one, to ask the question of who might be missing out, who might we have inadvertently left out. There's a lovely kind of phrase that I like to think about when creating these sorts of things. Don't build anything for me without me.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be a whole bunch of well-meaning people saying, let's do something for our veterans. And actually, there's nobody from a veteran community who's actually even part of this thing, and they didn't even want it. So nothing for me without me. Look at that.
You guys are like dropping the statements, man. I there's so many tweetable moments on here. I'm just like, I want to be tweeting during this conversation. Before we wrap up, let's just recap what we've talked about. So we've talked about why leaders are essential to diversity, equity, inclusion, and wellness programs. They are essential, both from a modeling perspective, leaning in perspective, checking in with their people perspective, making sure employees have what they need perspective, ensuring that feedback is getting to the diversity, equity, inclusion, and benefits and wellness teams, just to ensure that employees are getting what they need from the organizations for which they spend so much time working really, really hard for. Bhavik, do you have any final thoughts on this topic? Anything else you want to share?
I want leaders and organizations to know that this work is not a nice to have, and it's not a check the box exercise. And also, it's not something that you should defund or take away as we move into 2025. This work is necessary. It's critical. It's imperative that you find ways to integrate DEI and mental health within your business practices, because that is how you actually become a front runner in positive culture within your organization.
Yeah. Nice.
Such a rich conversation today. Let's leave our listeners with final thoughts from all three of us, and then we'll close it out. Dean, any final thoughts from you?
I'm just going to go back to something we may have said earlier on in our five-part podcast series, which is a mouthful, but that we actually can't take people further than we have traveled ourselves. So when creating psychologically safe and areas within our organizations that really feel like people belong, where there's good wellness, where their mental and their spiritual and their emotional and their physical well-being is cared for, we will only be able to affect just so much if you as the leader are still neglecting some of those areas yourself. So start with you. That's my final thought in terms of, wrapping up of 5 parts of this. But, continue to do your work as a leader. What you do really has a very, very big impact on the extent to which you can really help your people.
Love it.
Love it. The power of community. The power of community. As we move into the new year and the world is still chaotic, I would love to empower folks to leverage the communities that they're a part of and to understand that that is how we will get through a lot of these uncertain times. When so much is outside of our control, we can leverage on our community members to give us that joy and give us that peace and give us that hope that a lot of us need. And when we navigate through our communities with that level of hope, I truly believe that we will come out the other side in a very positive way. Yeah.
My final thought is inclusion isn't just a strategy. It really isn't a strategy. It's the foundation for a thriving workplace. And we've talked about that in every single part of the series. Dean and I talk about it pretty much in every podcast. It's just what you need in order to ensure that people are feeling connected to the place where they spend a lot of time. and will give you 100% of who they are if they feel that there is a space for them and they feel included in that space.
Yeah.
We want to thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, leading diversity and leading inclusively is not a strategy, it's a must-have. I think Bhavik said that early in the call. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and follow us, give us feedback, let us know what you thought of the series. More to come. We're super excited about 2025. We'll keep talking about it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you, Bhavik.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Bhavik. Thank you, Dean.